Okay, guys, we're gonna try this again. I've been trying to record this for quite a bit. Okay, guys, this is really crazy what I'm having to do here. All the craziness. So, with the heat and with everything going on and whatnot, I decided you're just gonna get to watch me wrap the journals for my trip to Minnesota tonight. And I thought we'll just do this and I'll just talk about it and I was gonna have like the books up so you could see each one as I was working on it, but A, not enough space. B, yeah, that I had no idea how long it was gonna take to do it. That would be crazy. So I was like, forget that, scratch that. So May was a pretty good reading month. It's actually kind of how I always expect reading months should go, and so seldom do. Uh, because I had like a couple of really great books, a couple of books that I was like, I don't really know what to think about this and a couple of books that I loved lots of it and not so much other parts. I had some good books, some meh books, and then I had a DNF. And I mean, it just feels like reading should be a little more like that. But for whatever reason, I usually just like what I read. And I'm glad that's true, but it was kind of neat to feel a little more, I don't know, normal. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, so I had some great books this month and some, again, meh, but we shall see. Yeah, I'm going to go to Minnesota. I'm going to a writing retreat, and I seriously doubt I will do much writing. I I've been running on fumes for 5 years, and the last year I have been like slowly, refilling that tank. But I would love if I could bring myself to just sit there and absorb and think and pray and journal, but not worry about working and just let it be it's supposed to be a working retreat, but I'm thinking I need to refume, you know. So I don't know, it'll all depend. I have a book due, so I really kind of can't afford that. But on the other hand, will I get stuff done faster if I am recharged? Probably. So we shall see. But I also have a podcast interview pretty soon, so I'm going to try to plow through these pretty quickly, but we all know Shatona and how that's probably not going to work. So, what do we have here? Number one, How to Solve Your Own Murder. I've got to talk about this book because How to Solve Your Own Murder was fascinating. This book by, what's her name? Okay, by Kristen Perrin. I've never read anything about it before, but basically, the gist of the story is a a girl as a teenager in England in like I think it's like the 60s, 70s. She goes to this fortune teller at some fete or carnival, one of the two, and is given this fortune that says that she will be murdered. So she spends the next, I don't know, 60 years or something trying to solve her own murder. And then when she is actually murdered, her granddaughter comes in and she's got all this woman's notes and everything so she can figure out. So there's this whole fortune thing that weaves through it. That's not usually my jam. But how the author did it in here is so different and so unique. And it also kind of shows the folly of this whole thing because here's the deal: this woman lived a rich and long life. That rich and long life she spent trying to solve something that hadn't even happened yet. I mean, if she had been murdered later, somebody's going to figure it out. So who cares? She just like wasted away. So it's kind of like a cautionary tale on the one hand. So I mean, I did like that aspect. The concept is cool though. I do like the concept. I like seeing all sides of this thing and the way that she kind of split past and present was really cool. And if you pay really close attention, you can absolutely solve this mystery. I got caught up on a couple of things that I had kind of like put in the wrong place, if I recall correctly. I'm getting a little messed up in my head, but I think that's what happened because of it. I did absolutely not solve the murder. I did solve a murder, but not the murder. And so that was kind of cool. First of all, things I loved. Number one, I think I said this even in my review. Gosh, I should have looked at that. But this is a mystery that has a perfect romance thread for it, and she really kind of ignored it. And I loved that. I love the fact that you could see what could happen and what is probably going to happen after the story ends without focusing on that. Because right now, this gal is trying to solve a murder. She's got people after her, and right now is not the time to be, getting all mushy. So that was kind of cool. Um, Agatha Christie did it. I think I did definitely say that in my review. She put very fast paced romances in her stuff. So I mean it's done, but I just love the fact that this gal showed what could be and then dropped it. The other thing I'm thinking of is she really made you doubt everyone. Every single person that you come across could have been the killer. I There was even a moment that I was like, so help me, if this is her mom, I'm going to just fly off the handle. So technically, there's a spoiler, but really, it was just a fleeting moment. I don't think anyone's truly going to suspect her mom. All right, but there was that just like half second that I was like, if this turns out to be, I'm going to be mad. So I mean, she made you just kind of doubt everything. Also, okay, I just went and looked at my review because I'm like, okay, whatever. You go all the way to the very end not knowing who is trustworthy and who isn't. And because of that, you're literally playing whack-a-mole with red herrings left and right. It was so, so good. Her settings became characters. I felt like I was in the 60s. And that awesome. Again, if for those who are looking for a strictly clean read, there are a yeah, there are a handful of foul words, particularly one particularly nasty one. I didn't appreciate it, but at least most weren't sloppy or gratuitous. It's one of those things where it's like I'm still going to hate it and I'm still going to be frustrated by it, but at least when an author uses them judiciously and not just carelessly toss it out like rose petals, I can deal with it. And so I mean I can at least respect the fact that they were being careful. I just wish they would leave it out. So many times it's proven that they're not needed. The reason I didn't give it 5 stars, there's only one reason, and it's because for me, I feel like she went, she chose the easy path, if you will. She made the guilty person the easy scapegoat, if you will, instead of just pushing all the way through and doing the tough choice that really needed to be the tough choice. And that really frustrated me because it would have been just that much better. But it was a great read. I will probably give another book of hers a try, but I'm not. I'm going to be kind of skeptical and a little iffy because again, the language wasn't. It just wasn't my thing. Next up was the Housekeeper and the Professor, and it was 5 stars almost from the first page. I just could not imagine as I was reading that it would go down, and it just didn't. I want to know why I've never heard of this book before. Why is nobody talking about this book? What was it super popular on BookTube like 10 years ago when it was actually written and everyone's forgotten it? Because I think this should be a classic. This is like it has all the things I love so much. It has everything I loved about Uva, and as far as I can recall, there was no language, and which I can't really say for Uva, but because you've got this professor, he is a little cranky, but it's a little understandable because after 25 years ago, or maybe even more, he had a car accident in which his brain was damaged and he only has 80 minutes of memory before he has to before like all restarts back to like yesterday is when the accident would have been, but he doesn't remember the accident. So it's like what they should have done with 51st dates but no romance. And so but this is the whole concept again, but only 80 minutes, and so it resets several times a day obviously, and it takes place in Japan, so you get a lot of really cool Japanese culture, And this man, he is so cool. So he's got this suit, and he puts like these little notes all over it to remind him of things. And one of them says you only have 80 minutes of memory. And one of them, it's like this little stick drawing of the housekeeper, like that's her name, that's who that is, and she is so loyal to him, and she is so good to him. And when he finds out she has a son who's at home alone, he's like, he should not be alone. He needs to come here. You need to bring him here. And the relationship that develops between this professor and this boy is absolutely beautiful. But the trio of a relationship, he becomes kind of like a father and grandfather figure to this housekeeper and her son. It is so crazy beautiful. I loved it. And I want to read what I said in my review because I think it says it better than I'm saying right now. I'm just a little bit in love with it. The entire story stands alone as a beautiful tribute to intelligence, compassion, humanity, and creation. But far more than that, it is a treatise on Matthew 7:12, whether the author meant for it to be or not. It's a sermon as a story, and yet it never preaches. Now, I got to say, for just a little bit at the end, I did think I was listening to it, and I did think I was just going to throw my phone. But I will say, if you get to this point, you're thinking, oh no, what are you doing? Oh no, just keep listening. It doesn't do it. When I finished, I was totally book drunk. And next up, I gave 3 stars to The Wooing of a Recluse by Gregory Marwood. And there's not much I can say about the book because there's really not much in the book. There's really no story. It's an epistolary novel, if you will, but again, there's no plot. It's just the experiences of this guy. He was like from New England, and he goes to the West. He goes to Arizona. He becomes a cowboy, and it's the differences between life in Arizona in 1909 versus, the East Coast. And it takes place like over a year. I don't even know if it's a whole year. It might just be just under or just over a year. And he's writing to someone who was obviously special to him once upon a time. And then the the story ends. I mean, we know he loves where he is. We know he loves what he's doing, sort of, but he's not going to stick to it. And then we're like, okay, because the story just ends. I just, there was, not sorry I read it, but I'm not keeping it either. I've got to find someone who wants to read it. So, yeah, if anyone wants to read it, let me know. I can mail it. Then I read Framley Parsonage, or I finished. I have been reading it all along, by Anthony Trollope, and I finally got that done. And this one was a definite 5 star for me. Each one seems to get better than the last, but that's not true. Because really, I think The Warden comes before Framley Parsonage, and Dr. Thorne's still my favorite. And then The Warden, then this one, and then like Parchester Towers or whatever, at least up to this point. But this one, they feel like they're written better. Each time, I don't feel like I'm getting a massive info dump. The further I go in, that info dump gets smaller. And, I'm like right now, I'm in the middle of the last Chronicle of Barsetshire and Barset, I mean, and there was very little info dump at all in this one. So I don't like that style where you just like pile it on. Just tell me when I need to know it. And so that's why I say they're getting better. But this one has, like, I don't know, it even has better themes and deeper illusions and stuff than even Dr. Thorne. It's just, there's so much richness in it. And then you have, I mean, and I gotta say, as I'm reading this, I'm wanting to just throttle people. Actually, I'm gonna go get my review because I like what I said about it in it, and I think I'm just gonna butcher it if I don't. Okay, here it is. I can't decide which I liked best, Lucy's Wisdom or Mark Robarts' Awakening, if you will. These books are brilliant at showing the biblical truth that there's nothing new under the sun. People make foolish friendships that lead them into foolish decisions. Mothers can make or break their relationships with their children with their own ambition and pride.
Gossip is the scourge of community, and true faith, as opposed to pietistic show, helps people make right choices and avoid the pitfalls of life. It is also a comfort when they don't. And that's that. I mean, the mother, Mrs. Lufton, she is so set on her own plans. I've watched parents do this, mothers who are reliving their childhood and their teen years through their kids, and they're driving their kids away. And I'm watching this in here going, yeah, there's nothing new. So, and Mark Robards, I just wanted to smack him. I just wanted to, oh my goodness, how stupid can you be? And it just also showed that they don't all know as much about stuff as we assume they did. Even financial, we assume that they were better with their finances back then. Yeah, not so sure about that anymore. Just saying. Because it seems like Trollope was writing in a way that just says, look at what we're doing. We are doing our men a disservice by not teaching them, what all this means. Because he was clueless about what he was doing. I mean, I'm watching him sign these debts that he's basically being a co-signer to debts and taking on that responsibility, and he has no clue that that's what he's doing. He really doesn't get it. And I partly because his friend is lying through his teeth, grant you, but still, I don't co-sign for people ever. I just don't, because unless I am willing to, that is my debt, period. And if you happen to help pay for it, great. Unless my brain is willing to do that, it's never going to happen. And yet this guy just cluelessly, he's just totally clueless. So there's that, for whatever it's worth. Next up was a mystery. It was a Miss Riddell cozy mystery by P.C. James. And in the end, it really did actually turn out to be pretty good. It was easy to figure out who it was, but most mysteries are for me. The neat thing is when an author is not who is when an author can help me figure out. So I know who you are. I've got this, but why? I don't get why. I love it when an author just totally can make me so lost at that I almost miss the real thing. So that was really cool. One of the main character's tendency, she jumps to conclusions all the time. And the slightest little suspicion is like, oh, this she didn't. She create this. Okay, this is how. This is why. And because of that, it was really distracting, and I think the author did it deliberately. But instead of distracting me, it actually drew me to the right conclusion. And so I think it was something she tried and didn't really succeed. But in the end, it was a pretty decent mystery. I will keep reading. I'm going to see if I like the further ones or not. The characterization was, just really brilliant. And there were several plots that kind of converged together into a cohesive unit. So it wasn't the best. Again, I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't the best, but it was good. And I did like it. So for what it's worth, there's that one. Next up, I read The Lonely Hearts Book Club by Lucy Gilmore. I've never read anything by Lucy Gilmore that I recall. And I don't know if I will try her again or not. There were a few things I really had problems with. I gave it 3 stars. I would have given it more if there weren't a few things that I was having problems with. I'm calling it A Man Called Uva Meets Pollyanna, but not. So there might be a few spoilers in this. I've got my review up because this is when I wanted to really refresh my memory about some things, because I wrote a very long review. And I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So I said, but for a few things, this would have been a 5-star read, and I don't think I'm being fair to the author. The book does not pretend to include some of the things I didn't appreciate. That's on me. But I'm just going to share what was in it, what I liked, what I didn't like, and hope that people can just make a decision based upon what's best for them. If things that bothered me don't bother you, you will probably love the book, so there's that. So the character of Sloane is the epitome of a sunshine, if you will. She grew up in a house full of angry, yelling people, and she's had quite a bit of tragedy in her life, and so she has just decided that she will live a beautiful life, and she will not let people drag her into ugliness, and nobody's going to get her down. And some people, I think, would probably see her as not believable, but because of her situation, I think she totally is. But she wasn't just, and mainly because she wasn't just happy and fake. She let her guard down and got snarky from time to time. Sometimes it was appropriate, and sometimes she couldn't override, and she didn't just fake it when she couldn't override. She dealt with it, and so Arthur, I think that's his name. I could be wrong, but Arthur, the grumpy old man, he has that strong Uva vibe. Except Uva had a reason for being grumpy. He all he wanted was people to do things right, and as long as people did things right, he didn't care. He was totally pleasant. But when people weren't willing to do things right, then he got frustrated and lost his temper. Right? And this guy is just angry, bitter, horrible. Just he doesn't know how to function, to interact, to do anything unless he is grumpy. And he's done it, I think, for so long that it's like his default. I don't even think he realizes he's doing that anymore. And what I loved about this guy is here's this grumpy, horrible guy who may have apologized once in his whole life. In this thing, he has to make a few apologies. And when he does, they're flawed, flawed apologies, but they are so beautifully sincere that I just loved it. And then the neighbor, I wish I could remember her name. I feel like it starts with an M, but I don't know. Anyway, she is that mother that tries too hard and drives her kid away from trying too hard, and she's hurting, and she's so desperate for real friendships, and she's a very observant person, and she is kind as well to Arthur regardless of how Arthur treats her. She's just a really neat person. And then Arthur's grandson, he is I loved it, loved him. Brett is her fiance, and um I nobody wants him for her. Everybody can see that he is bad for her, and he comes off as kind of a horrible person, but he's not. He's actually a really great guy. He just isn't the great guy for her, and that's part of the story. They have this. They end up creating like this misfit book club. She was a librarian. This Arthur used to come in and grouse at her and everything. And then she gets fired when she gets concerned about him, looks up his address and goes to find him. Turns out he's really sick. But, that happens. And then, so she gets fired. And understandably so. I didn't like it, but it's understandable. And then, all these people that come together and they create this like book club, and what they do with a book at the end of this thing for Sloane is so heartrendingly beautiful that it's worth reading the book, even with its flaws, just for that. I'm just saying. What I didn't like, there are maybe a dozen foul words, and they might have been appropriate for the moment. They absolutely could have been left out without making the book feel fake. I did love one guy, so I'm reading from my thing here. I did love the one guy apologizing for letting something loose. That was a nice change because at least he recognized that it was inappropriate, and he said so. And I can get behind someone making a mistake. And did I want to read it? No, but I at least like the author acknowledging that. Once in a while, everybody has issues in this book, and sometimes they definitely feel way over the top. It feels a little melodramatic, and if it hadn't been that way, though, I feel like the book kind of would have fallen a little bit flat or not. I don't know. And then the thing that was most uncomfortable for me and it's not the focus of the book. It's just a fact within the book, and it just wasn't. I've read this in other books, and it didn't bother me, but I'm just gonna say what I think. There is a gay relationship in here. Um, we're mainly focused on the one guy and his life and everything and his relationship with his mom and all the things. But he is living with his boyfriend, and that their life is definitely part of the story. Their troubles are definitely part of the story, and I wasn't comfortable with it. And I never am. I've seen this done in other books. The Guernsey books has a gay guy in it, and it's just a matter of fact kind of thing. This felt like it's a little bit more on the page, if you will, this whole relationship, and it's uncomfortable for me. So I didn't like that part, but it is what it is. Can I recommend the book? Probably not, but I don't recommend people stay away from it either. If the things I mentioned don't bother you, you probably enjoy it because there was a lot to love about it.
Okay, so the next book I read was The Fourth Ruby, which is the second in the Lost Property Office, or the Section 13. That Lost Property Office was the first book. The Section 13 series by James R. Hannibal. So it's middle grade. No, I would say it's just middle grade. Anyway, oh my goodness, this thing. I felt like I got on a roller coaster and I didn't get off until I staggered off at the end when everything was over. It was so good. It was so good. And it was really neat. One of the best things about it, I would say, in my, as an adult anyway, I loved the character growth. I loved seeing the mistakes the kids are making, the foolish decisions, these smart decisions, and growing from learning from those decisions. And it's Jack is such a neat character. I kind of feel like Indiana Jones would have been a little bit like Jack as a kid, in that if he had been had a chance for adventure, because Jack, he doesn't get everything right the first time. He goes in and he like almost kind of like guns blazing, if you will. No guns, no blazing, but he just dives into situations and he fights his way out with what he knows, and he figures out that, oh, wait a minute, if I do this and then something really works well, and he's like, oh, okay, and he'll work with that, and then he'll go back and he'll make another stupid mistake, or he'll have luck, and other times somebody else figures stuff out and they will have the luck, if you will. And yet on the other hand, sometimes even those things don't work because of their attitudes behind it. But he just the best thing about him, I guess I would say, is that here's a kid who loves his family, he loves his dad, he wants to do the right thing, and it doesn't always work out the way it should, because sometimes his idea of what is the right thing isn't, because he's a kid, but he's trying, and you just end up with this really great kind of like, it's almost the middle grade equivalent of the coming of age, if you will. I don't know how else to put it, but I do want to say, parental note all over the place. If magical stuff bothers you, and even if the last book's content, the little bit of, the artifacts, because it is kind of a little bit of Warehouse 13 meets Doctor Who meets Harry Potter, all whooshed in there. You don't have witches, you don't have wizards, you don't have spells like that, but you do have magical elements. And in this one, if you didn't like Harry Potter, you will not like this book. I just don't think so. You and I'm going to give this spoiler away. I'm going to be really careful, trying not to be too spoilery, but I think this is an important parental warning for parents who are this matters to them. There is a guy who is trying to use the quote spirit of a historical character to take over the world. Jack's job is to stop him, but there is that, in my opinion,
That's the kind of thing that is what the Bible is talking about when it says, you're not supposed to have anything to do with mediums, and you're not supposed to have anything to do with witchcraft. That's what I see the Bible talking about, and Jack is trying to stop it. I'm for that. I'm okay with that. If that kind of behavior was considered okay in the thing, I would not be for it. And that's not the kind of stuff I see happening in uh, Harry Potter. For one thing, those people aren't human, so you've got that. But so that's why I can totally handle Harry Potter, and wouldn't handle this if Jack decided to combat it by doing the same thing. Maybe if he had tried to do the same thing with some other historical character to combat it, I would have put the book down and pushed it away. That's not what happens. He's fighting this misuse of some historical character's spirit. So just as a warning. But it was fun. It was great, and I can't read the next. I can't read. Can't wait to read the next one. Then I read another Marius Quinn mystery. It's the Castleton Affair by Benedict Brown. It's number 3. And oh goodness, this series, it's really funny. I think Lord Edgington is still my favorite series. I love Christopher. I wish I could remember his last name, but I really Prentice. Ha! I remembered. Woo! But I love his character so much, and I love seeing him grow and whatever. And it is a classic, usually a fair play mystery. So I'm like totally behind those. But these things that he's doing with these Marius Quinns, he's really playing with so many different elements. And oh, wow, there's so much fun. And he's using he's just experimenting with all these different plot devices. And I think they are just totally working well. This one is fun because it brings in and Christie did it too, several of the Golden Age, and he writes a little bit like a Golden Age mystery author. They brought in spies sometimes. Yeah, he brings in a spy this time. Okay, so pretty early on, something happens, and they have to talk to someone. And when they talk to someone, I was so sure that that someone was part of this in some way. And I was so sure of it that I could see that all the way through the book. I was really trying to figure out what was going on. Like, this person knew but wasn't actually behind it, or maybe this person discovered, or I was trying to figure out how it could still work because it so fit all the way through. And I was wrong the whole time. It was so cool. But it was I can't remember, maybe 3/4 somewhere in there is when I figured out who it really was. I was trying to figure that out. It's like, is this person then still a part of this or not? There was definitely a double bluff kind of thing going on. That was great. He just really got me. He just, oh man. And I have in my review, he's dropping tiny breadcrumbs to show Bella's opinions on things and doing a fabulous job of keeping the suspense up in that department. I'm usually indifferent to romantic subplots, but this one is nice because it's just a bit here and there. And as long as she chucks Gilbert, she can stay single and carefree for the rest of her life or marry Marius tomorrow. I don't care. Just chuck the jerk. And then, okay, here's the deal. There's this part when we got to it, I was like, and I can't be the only one who's going to do this. I was like, that is so dumb. Why are you doing this? You are just being. I was just like so annoyed. And then I just, you should trust an author when they haven't failed you before. Yeah, he took that totally not plausible thing and just it just turned it on. It was so cool. It was just it was so good. Loved it. Had a great time. Can't wait for the next one. It will take too long, and I'm sad about that. And then, because one spy wasn't enough, I read An Assassination on the Agenda by T.E. Kinsey. And we there okay, so Lady Hardcastle and Flo were spies for the crown before they moved to Littleton Cotterell or wherever it is that they live in the country. And they did all these daring do's, right? But then they moved to the English countryside and they start solving mysteries, unintentionally and not always willingly, right? Well, here's the deal. This feels like they're in the middle of, quote, the good old days, but now in this one because they're being asked to spy. And all along there was part of it that I was like, I knew what was going on. And I knew that, some things were being hidden and other things were not and all that good stuff. But Kinsey took this what's going on. That this certain something has to be behind it. It. But she did something else so well that you missed how. And I was like, it totally tripped me up. They are so certain that something is involved. And I thought that who I thought was really behind it was using that something that is involved for their benefit in a much more literal way. And that's all I'm going to say because I don't want to give anything away. But also, so like 1914, the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand that kicked off World War I. That this has like allusions to that, like what could have happened, and before that actually happened. So I'm just going to stop there because I don't want to give anything away. But we know that there's an assassination on the agenda. I'm just giving you that tiny little hint of the direction that he took it. He took a what could have happened and ran with it, and it was great. I just again now we have to wait for the next one. I'm like, great, just what I needed. Then I finally finished Paul E. Miller's A Praying Life. And guys, this book, Chantal from Chantal Reads All Day recommended it. I started listening last year or year before, I'm not sure which. And it says nearly a year on my review. So I was been almost a year since I think I started it last June. And I loved almost all of it. There were a couple of little tiny things that I realized, one in particular, I felt like I misunderstood what he was meaning, but he talked about like throwing energy out into the world with something. And I was like, what? No, nothing else sent off major alarm bells, but there were a couple of things that I was like, okay, not technically wrong, but just didn't grab me. But because of that, is why I'm so confident that I misunderstood or he miswrote what he meant by that whole energy thing, because it contradicts everything else he said. And so I'm convinced, I listened to it on audio and maybe it didn't translate well in there, or maybe it just wasn't written well. I don't know. But my favorite quote from the book was, if we think we, I'm paraphrasing, but if we think we can do life on our own, we won't consider prayer to be essential. And that is something I keep every time I like want to brush off prayer. Like if I'm just walking around, I'm praying in my head all the time. But if I want to sit down and actually focus on prayer, I tend to kind of let myself brush it off here and there. But now when I start seeing myself do that, I'm like, so you think you can do life on your own? And it's like this really cool reminder, and I love it. I just loved it so much. I'm going to take this from my review because it says better what I'm going to be able to say. I said the best thing I got from this book was the complete confidence that prayer is a conversation that keeps a relationship alive. We talk to friends and family. We write them letters. We zip short notes or messages through the mail or online. We do this because relationship is communication. So why wouldn't we keep in constant communication with the most important quote person in our lives? And yeah, it was just so good. It was just highly recommend it, and I will definitely be rereading it. I think I've bought a paperback already, so I can go highlight it. So there's that. But I'm glad I listened to it too. I think listening to it was a good idea. Then next up, I read Catherine's Marriage by D.E. Stevenson. I gave this one 4 stars. What I loved so much. And my review says I loved it right up to the last paragraph and then it fell flat. But that's because, seriously, I don't feel like the book is done. There's no real ending to this thing. We have all these situations, we have partial solutions to some, and the rest is just kind of like, I don't know, and like the last third to quarter, somewhere in there, there's really not a lot about Catherine's marriage, which is this thing that this book is about. They're apart. They haven't been married that long. And now they're apart while he's dealing with her stepson's family. And I'm like, what? I mean, don't get me wrong. It is a lovely story. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed all of it. Even that third that doesn't really talk about the marriage, I don't care. It was a good story up until that last paragraph when I'm like, wait a minute, we're done. I don't have resolution. I was so frustrated, especially when I found out there's not another one in the story. I mean, there's technically, from what I understand, there's another book about Simon, if I recall correctly, and I almost feel like I've read it because it's starting to feel like it fits in here. I don't know. I got to look at that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But for whatever, and if that's the case, it's a story I didn't actually like what she did with. So there's that. But it's sad. I almost think there's so many really great lessons in this thing that I wouldn't tell someone not to read it. However, if you loved Catherine Wentworth and you don't need more of the story, it doesn't grab you to get more, especially because it's not going to be full and complete, then I wouldn't even read this one. I'm glad I did. Totally glad I did. Still gave it 4 stars, but it should have been a 5-star read and it wasn't, and that was sad. Then I read, finally, The Small House at Allington, and this one had a lot of stuff going on. And honestly, this one felt like it had less spiritual truth to it. And yet, on the other hand, because it is kind of a cautionary tale to young men about, be careful who you connect yourself with. Not just, kind of like Mark Robarts in the Framley Cottage, he made poor friendship choices and it led him into some problems. But then on this one, we have Crosby he gets so focused on money and making more money and how money can elevate his position, whatever. He makes this decision that he's going to engage himself. And then when he discovers that the girl doesn't have any money and that a wealthy family with great connections is interested in him for their daughter, he just makes really stupid decisions regarding both of those women. It's not just, oh well, I want more, so I'll go here, or oh, I like her better, she's nicer, I'll go there. He's so stupid in regard to both of them that it just makes me want to shake everybody. And I kind of cheered when someone pummeled him. But John Eames isn't any better. He's supposed to be like this hero, and yet Trollope shows that even our heroes make really, really dumb decisions sometimes. And he is totally not interested in a young woman, and yet he flirts with her and kind of leads her on. Not anything like Crosby did, nowhere near as strongly. He actually, even at some point, makes it known that he's not going to go there with her. But then he keeps playing the game. You can't have it on both sides. And so Trollope is really showing young men, be careful what what you say and who you align yourself with and all those things. That is great. And then it's also neat because we see the feminine side of this. We see young women who take advantage of this situation and use it to try to further themselves and benefit themselves. And then we see how the friends and the family have to deal with it all. We see how one there's one young woman pretty much ruins her life, whereas another young woman settles, and then this other young woman, she's going to stand for what she thinks is best and right, and her heart is noble and beautiful and wonderful. Her decisions, though, and I love that he showed it. She is choosing to see herself in a situation that is not real. And because it was going to be real to her, she just decides that it is now real, and she's going to surround her whole life around what is actually false. So even though much of what is behind her is a beautiful and wonderful thing, she's using it also in addition in an unhealthy way too. And he just shows it all, and it's fascinating. It's just I I really, really, really loved it. And yet I only gave it 4 stars because some of it, there were so many times I wanted to throw the book, and I think it's because he kind of took some of it a little too far for me, and I think that's really what it was. But it was more of a 4.5 star. Maybe I should bump it up. I don't know. I may change my mind on that. We'll see. Then I read South Rising by Winifried Holtby, and guys, I don't even know what to think about this book. There were a lot of really good things about it. It was a fascinating. It kind of feels in how the characters interact and how we interact with them. It has almost a feel of like Lark Rise to Candleford, but 40 years in the future or more, maybe. It just kind of has that feel instead of Victorian, we're in the 30s. There was some really good stuff in the book, and then there's a lot of, the end is like totally meh, and then on the other hand, it totally infuriates me. And because it infuriates me, I could actually end up dropping a star. So in this one, there is a situation where our main character falls in love with a married man, and it's kind of got a Rochester feel with the whole Jane Eyre thing, and she even happens to be a schoolmistress, so there's that. But I don't like Jane Eyre for this reason, but I also don't like this gal goes so far as to try to seduce this man. She decides she wants to have his baby, and we don't see any of that, and it fails. Okay, I will give you that up front. It's a spoiler, but I feel like that's kind of important, on the off chance somebody actually wants to read it. But then there is this undertow, and I think this is why the book was written. I think the book was written to try to push the socialist agenda that was a big deal in England at the time. And the author spends a lot of time having people pushing for more services, more people on the dole, more money, better housing, all the things. Let's do this. And this one man keeps saying, but who's going to pay for it? Where's the money going to come from? And they're like, well, we'll just raise the taxes. And he's just going, where's the money going to come from to raise the taxes? Who's going to pay that? The people who can't bring themselves up out of this already, now they have to pay more. This isn't right. This is not the answer. And he's trying to, people are seeing him as, oh, I don't want the past to change it, but he's actually showing massive amount of compassion on people who otherwise don't have. Oh, it just. Mm. Then we get to the end, and it just ends. Now there is a beautiful kind of coming to an understanding near the end between a couple of characters. That was truly beautiful. It really was. And the headmistress, she does a little bit of
something that how she does it, I felt like was over the top and even potentially dangerous because of these girls' age. They're at that really impressionable age. And on the other hand, I liked that she did it anyway because it's also something that young people need to hear. But she basically says, investigate everything that someone tells you. Don't just take their word for it, or don't just reject it because you don't agree with their word. Investigate it yourself and find out. And that's that I'm 1000% behind. But the way it was written, it kind of felt like question for questioning's sake. Everything, we basically need to overhaul everything, and so make sure that you're a part of that. And here's how I'm going to make sure you do it. I'm going to tell you to question even me. Just make sure you even question me. But there was just, it feels like there was an agenda behind it, but the gist of it, I'm like totally behind. I liked it. I don't know. I could not recommend the book. I don't think a lot of people would like it. People who like literary fiction would might. Um, but there, you know, we had a similar situation with a woman falling in love with a married man in Elizabeth Googe's The Scent of Water. And the difference between this book here and The Scent of Water are so night and day, it isn't even funny. In The Scent of Water, this woman discovers, she figures out, and she's a little horrified to realize that she is in love with a married man. She keeps it to herself. She keeps everything with the friendship between this man and his wife. She keeps it all at a normal, even keel. She doesn't show it. She works very hard to repress it. And she takes that up between her and the Lord, and she just takes care of it. The point, in my opinion, for the story was these things happen. This is what it looks like when you decide to do the right thing about it. And I loved that. I really did. But I did not love it at all in here. At all. So finally, I read or tried to read Lulu's Cafe by T.I. Lowe. I got, pretty early on. So I'm this is sort of spoilers, but not really. I think you can read most of this in the look inside or the sample. Now that's what they call it now. This woman in this story, the primary story about her, she is in a horribly abusive relationship, and we live the abuse with her. That was bad enough, but I can handle that. I can totally handle that. Then her husband, quite brutally actually, rapes her. And it's not like it's on the page in the sense that we're getting a play by play of everything that's happening. It's not that, but we are there in present time, and that was too much for me. I closed the book, I put it away. I'm not going to continue it. That's one thing. I can handle a few foul words 1,000 times easier than I can handle that. That was just a no for me. And not everybody is going to have the problems with it that I have. That is just the one thing. I can handle a pretty brutal murder a million times more than I can handle. It's just my thing. I can't handle it. So that's what I read. Yep. And I loved last month, and I'm already pretty far ahead on this month. I've read quite a few books and got thoughts on books and things, but that'll come in the future. Meanwhile, I looking forward to sharing my friend's little free library with you guys and what we're doing at the writing retreat and all the fun stuff in this. Stay tuned. I think Friday, so I guess that's tomorrow. Um, but I should be putting out a link to some free books by the authors that I'm here with, and all the stuff that's going on. I'll be sharing all that stuff. I've got a new set of prize boxes to share. I've got all kinds of stuff coming, and it's just been so weird lately. But I'm well now. My voice is, cuts out. I mean, as you can tell, it's getting kind of scruffy, but it's better, and I'll take better. So yeah, I'll see you guys later, and looking forward to sharing all that's going on.